So we're back again for another episode of Percussion Discussion, and I am absolutely thrilled. We've got one of the UK's finest young drummers and definitely the most creative and inventive I've seen for some time. I'd like to welcome Mr. Rich Kass. Thanks for doing this, Rich.
Oh, thanks very much for having me, Matty. Thanks for the kind words as well.
Oh, it's all true, and I love the T-shirt as well. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. So I guess the best place to start, as I always do with the interviews, we'll start right back at the beginning, which wasn't that long ago for you. I think you're the youngest drummer I've had on so far. So where did it begin?
It was quite a while ago now, but I guess, like a lot of people, I started in my teens, and funny, I was thinking about this recently. The reason I got into drumming was because my older brother sort of writes music, and at this point played guitar and sang, and he started playing in a band with a drummer who was in his year at high school. And one day they had a band practice at our house, and so this drum kit arrived, and I'd never seen a drum kit before. And I remember looking at it and thinking, like, that is seriously good. I want to hit that. I just was caught by it, the look of it, all the different things, and then the sound of it. And then the drummer was like, yeah, like, we're going for a break. Don't play this. And of course, like, as soon as they were at the room, I started hitting it, and he came down, and he like took the sticks off me and was like, don't play it. But actually, then he was nice enough to like to show me how to play like a basic beat, and then a little while later he showed me a few other things as well, actually. And so eventually I bugged my parents and got like a second-hand drum kit. I guess I was like 13, 14 at this point, and just started playing along to records, like anything I'd listen to in the car with my mum and dad, anything that was on like MTV or Kerrang, a lot of like punk rock and stuff like Green Day and things, and I would play in bands where we do covers of that stuff in high school. And yeah, it was just playing along in my bedroom. I had a sort of curfew of 9 o'clock at night. My bedroom was right above the front room in my parents' house. So like,
that's quite a late curfew, that, I have to say. My curfew was 6 p.m. and that was that.
Yeah, I have to say, in hindsight, my folks were like super encouraging and super lovely. They would just like crank Question Time or whatever they were watching, and I would thrash out the music, and then about 9 o'clock, my mum would be like, okay, it's time to come downstairs now. So that was it, really. Nothing like, if you compare most of the music I play now to how I started out, it's very different, really. But I still love all that kind of music, and
of course,
different points in my life I've played quite a lot of different kinds of music, really. But yeah, that's where it started.
So you must have, seeing the insane stuff you play now, and I mean that respectfully, but it scares me, I'll be honest, the things you do at the moment. To get to that level, you must have taken some serious lessons, and that's not just having a bash at home that gets you to that level, is it? How did your education involve lots of teachers and what have you? Obviously drum teachers.
So I think I probably took like a not sort of traditional linear route, actually. So what happened was, in my last year of high school, I had a scholarship to go to London School of Economics. I was quite interested in business and studies and things at school, and I think I was probably sort of naturally quite good at it. But my brother had gone to uni at Napier University in Edinburgh to do composition, and I kind of sort of thought, oh, I quite like playing the drums. So I didn't have any music qualifications, I'd not studied it. So I sort of did this like 1 year prep course at a college in Edinburgh, where you like would do like your higher or advanced higher music, which is the equivalent of A level. And therefore, if I wanted to, I could apply to do music at university. And I think at that point in my head, I was like, oh, I'm just going to have a year where I, go to music college and hang out and play drums, and then I'll probably go and do this business thing. But then what happened was, when I was at the college, I applied for the university my brother was at, Napier, and I got an audition, and you do like a written theory test, an oral theory test, and then an audition. and I got an unconditional without any music qualifications at that point. I thought I was going to have to get a conditional, so I think I actually didn't finish college. I can't really remember if I sat all the exams or not. I wasn't. But I had a good time anyway when I was there. But it was my first year living away from home, so I'm not sure that I really took it as seriously as I take it now. So then I went to uni and studied there, and I had some drum lessons there. But actually, when I got serious about it, was like kind of a bit later on. I think about halfway through uni, I started to take it a bit more seriously. And then I started to seek out some lessons from sort of players who I admired. So there's a great Scottish drummer called Alan Cosker, who's really amazing player and pretty prolific. He's done all kinds of things, from playing with like the Scottish National Jazz Orchestra and Tommy Smith and all those kind of heavyweights, to doing like quite a lot of well-known like sort of like folk and pop records, and he can do it all. He's like an amazing player. Anyway, I hit him up for some lessons. I haven't seen him play, and I remember he came along and he was like, "What do what do you want to learn about?" And I was like, "I want to learn about like metric modulation and all this stuff." And he's like, "Okay, so I'd love to hear you just sit down and like play me like a blues, so just get an idea of how you sound on the kit." And I played for a little while, and he was like, "Cool. So let's talk a little bit about time." And that's when I realized that like I'd probably, I was still in my bedroom playing along and had a lot of work to do. And he was like super lovely about it, but he basically sat down and listened to me and said like, "This is what I hear, this is what I think you need to work on, and to me music is about these things, and that's what I'm thinking about when I try and play." And it was probably pretty hard to hear. Like, I think at the time it was at first, but it was the best lesson I ever had. And I still think about those things all the time. And it was the start probably there of a journey for me where I really started to self-study and think a lot more about my sound and my time and the clarity of what I was doing. And a lot of the rhythmic stuff and things that I'm working on now, I've kind of assimilated through some lessons, but mostly through self-study and playing that kind of music with musicians who also understand it, and learning from them and learning from records. And I think that's one of the things about studying music, is that whilst I think I probably would have loved it if I'd had some of those lessons that I just talked about much earlier on, I can't change that. But a huge part of becoming a better player is self-study and learning from other musicians, and you have to do the self-reflection yourself. You have to listen to yourself, because you're not going to have somebody there the whole time who's going to listen to each note and tell you, "No, you must change that and you must do that." Like, it's a constant education. It's a constant lifelong learning for me anyway. So I think most of the stuff that I have together, I've like got through self-study, through some one-off lessons and things with different people, and through the sort of social aspect of playing a lot of this music with like-minded musicians, and with musicians who have maybe got more together than me, and trying to like sponge off them,
No bad thing, that, is it? And I read somewhere that you've had some lessons with the mighty Jojo Mayer as well. Is that right? Is my information correct?
Yeah. So a couple of different points. Once when he was in the UK, and once when I was in New York as well. Yeah, that was before the first DVD came out, The Secret Weapons for the Modern Drummer, and so quite a lot of what he showed me was stuff that was in that, actually. But it was amazing to see and hear the application in person. Like, the DVD is absolutely amazing, but he's such an intelligent guy. He's so bright and so knowledgeable. That was great. That was very inspiring.
Yeah, phenomenal. I mean, I've seen him with Nerve a couple of times, and you know, in clinic, and been blown away each time. So did you get a lot from him? Did you think? Do you think you took a lot from him?
Totally. I think I still, like with most of the lessons that I've taken since that point I was talking about, I still think about the stuff almost all the time when I'm thinking about playing, or I come across a problem, or so a lot of the sort of technique stuff I think about a lot, and also he's really like a real artist, I think, and has a strong vision of the music and a strong vision for what he's trying to do on the drum kit. And I found that side of it quite inspiring as well, to start to think about maybe not necessarily trying to be all things to all men, but to have an idea of a world that you want to inhabit, or something you want to do or say with your playing, and to pursue that. And that doesn't have to be all you do, of course, but it definitely probably has pointed me more towards a path where, like, I feel I'm more interested in trying to be an artist than necessarily be like a um, jack of all trades that absolutely does everything. Although maybe a little earlier on in my life, I was doing more of that, but right now I'm sort of veering off to one side.
It's no bad thing. It really isn't. So, obviously, you've just touched on it there. So, once university was out the way, obviously, you went straight to being a pro player, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. So what happened was, when I finished uni, I spent a little bit of time in New York, and when I got back, I got a call to do like a musical at the Edinburgh Festival. So I live in Edinburgh, and then so that was like a run of shows. I was like, okay, great. And then when that was happening, a guitarist I knew had joined a band for a pop artist who'd been signed to quite a big label, and they were auditioning drummers. And for whatever reason, it hadn't worked out with the drummer they had. And he called me and said, "Oh, do you want to come to this audition?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I went to the audition and was sort of lucky to get the gig. And so I started to just kind of have enough gigs to pay my rent. And at that point, I was like, well, I guess I'll have to get a job. I had a few part-time jobs or whatever when I was at uni, but I just left them when I went away. So I just thought, this is good. Let's just see what happens. And one thing kind of led to another. And at that point, I was doing quite a lot of stuff in the pop world, actually, which is something I don't really do at all anymore. But yeah, and ever since then, all these little things have just kind of popped up left and right, and followed my nose a little bit, and sometimes covered my nose and gone the other way. But
Amazing, though. I mean, but you've done. I know a few of the artists, whatever you want to say, that you've played for. Sugababes being one.
yeah,
Yeah, how was that? I mean, obviously it's a million miles away from what you're doing at the moment, isn't it? Did you find that? Did you know then that this isn't for me? Did you find it boring, or was it was just paying bills, simple as that? You know?
it's interesting because it seems like a long time ago now, like that world. But I think at the time, because I'd done some slightly lower profile pop gigs on the way to that, it felt like a step up, and I was really felt quite lucky to get asked to do that, and so at the time I was like, yeah, but to be honest, a little while later on, I'd been doing a lot of different pop things, and I did come to the conclusion that it wasn't for me anymore. I don't find any music easy, really. I think everything is challenging. I really mean that. So if I was to play the most simple thing, because it's so exposed, to play that really well in some ways is almost harder than to play something where you can hide behind the fact that it's maybe harder to follow or whatever. So I try and respect every piece of music I play, and I think I've, like, for all the mistakes I've made, I think I've always tried to do that, is to try and always do the best I can. But yeah, a little while after that, I think I'd done a bunch of like high profile-ish stuff, and I think at first I thought, oh, I'm kind of quite successful because some of the stuff's on TV and there's big audiences and all that kind of thing. But after a while, I realized that maybe it wasn't everything I liked, and to be honest, getting paid from production companies is not a lot of fun. And whilst the musicians were totally cool, some of the people that work in the management and stuff in that particular sector of the music industry are not really my kind of people. I come from a small village outside Inverness, and I'm quite sort of family orientated, and um, I'm I believe more in trying to be a good person than like making lots of money and not caring about music.
It can
And
be
I
a bit
think like
mercenary, can't it?
yeah, I think particularly in some of the business side of it, there's some people who maybe aren't that particularly interested in music, but are interested in making money or whatever. And I think that it's not the easiest way to pay the rent. But ultimately, what drove me away from it was that I was interested in other kinds of music,
Yeah.
and I felt that I was playing music which I wasn't quite so interested in, and I wasn't going to get better at the other stuff unless I dedicated more time to it and tried to commit to it. And so that's kind of what happened after a while. I just said, for now, I'm not gonna do any more of that for a while.
Was that an easy decision to make?
Can't really remember, but
Saying goodbye to a paycheck, aren't you? And jumping into the unknown a little bit.
yeah, I think that the difficult thing was maybe a pride thing because like at that point I was quite young and maybe actually deep down not as confident as I am now. So maybe at the time it's quite easy. I don't know if you're at a party and you're trying to chat up a lovely girl, it's quite easy to say like, "Oh yeah, I'm a drummer and I play for this band that you've heard of." Oh, cool. And I kind of went from that to actually I took a teaching gig and took all kinds of smaller gigs, and so I was still paying the bills, but it was potentially not as glamorous. And like probably the hard thing at first was like just accepting that what I was doing was maybe not as impressive to people. And, and I don't say that with any kind of, I mean, I think it's really stupid to think that way in hindsight, but I was young and I was ambitious and, so it probably was a little bit tricky at first, but ultimately it was definitely the right decision. And I knew that at the time or I wouldn't have made the decision, I guess.
Yeah. No, well, I tell you what. I mean, fair play to you, just saying, right, this is the way it's going to be. And then, so what happened? Where did you go from there? Then, how long was it before you hooked up with the guys from the trio?
I am terrible with like chronology in terms of years. Like, if you were to say like, what year did you do something, I wouldn't know without cycling through my Facebook feed. And to that extent, I'm probably quite good at living in the present, but it was a little while. I had a lot of other projects and things that happened in between.
Yeah.
But I think the first time I played with the trio HLK, would have been in 2015, I think.
Oh, so it's fairly recent in the grand scheme of things then.
Yeah, that was the first concert, but I started playing with Rich, the pianist, quite a while before that. He doesn't live in Edinburgh now. He lives in Manchester.
Yeah.
And Ant, the guitarist, lives in London. But at one point, Rich was living in Edinburgh for a little while and, playing with lots of different musicians, sort of found out he was in town and supposed to be very good, very interesting musician as well. And we sort of hooked up for a play and he sent me some of his compositions, and it just sort of coincided that some of the rhythmic information and stuff that was in there was stuff I was starting to delve into at that point. And so it kind of like connected with it quite quick. Before we played, I was like, oh, this is weird. I'm currently thinking about some of these devices and ideas, and they're all contained within this first piece he sent me. So yeah, I sent him an email and said, hey, in this bar and this thing, are you thinking about these things happening? And he was like, yeah. So then we hooked up and played, and for a while it was just a project of just like playing all kinds of things, playing some of his music, playing some music of like Michel Camilo and stuff, playing some Herbie stuff, some standards. We were just like playing loosely maybe jazz orientated music. And eventually we sort of started a trio which didn't have bass guitar, and it was with a different guitarist. We went through a couple of guitarists, and I knew Ant from a long time ago, and I said to Rich, I think he'd be perfect for the project. He studies a lot of Indian music, and his own music's kind of quite similar to got some similar rhythmic information in it and stuff. So yeah, eventually the three of us came together and we did our first show, I think in early 2015. I think.
Because I mean, I was first introduced to you. It's probably 2 years in January, February. I think it was the Royal Northern College. You played at the Day of Percussion.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh wow! It really is a musical feast, I think is the best way of describing it. It's not tap your foot along material, is it? You know, in case you're only watching, you know, I'll have a little dance to it. No.
No, I would say it's rooted in contemporary classical music and jazz and improvisation. Those two things really, and a lot of the music deals with kind of a lot of rhythmic counterpoint. So there might be a lot of different type signatures or multiple rhythms happening, but generally for musical effect, for tension and release, or a lot of the music's quite thematic, so it'll bring a theme up and toy with it, and so these different time signatures will be used to give the idea that the theme is lengthening and shortening, which again provides sort of tension and release or whatever. So I don't think you need to be able to count through it to appreciate it. In fact, I don't think it's designed to be heard that way. That's just what you need to be able to do in order to play it.
Yeah.
But for me, the experience with listening to that music is about the themes and the rhythmic devices which create tension and release, and the forced interaction in the improvisation that happens when you're having to navigate a rhythmic form and tell it where the rhythms change and keep like a clear narrative through it in the same way that you would have to when navigating chord changes or different tonal centers, you know?
I find that incredible that there's room for improvisation in, I mean, that must be, the rehearsal that goes into that must be incredible. Because I remember sitting, you gave part of a score out, just a little handout thing, and it was, okay, yeah. And I got through it eventually. I think you repeated a section. But to improvise over that must be great fun, but challenging, I'm guessing.
I think it is, or it certainly is at first. But the thing that I think is quite important to bear in mind is that it's a language that we all kind of speak. So after a while, you get used to dealing with lots of different groupings and different meters and different lengths of bars, and they become to some extent as familiar as, you know, different scales or whatever. Where after a while, you don't necessarily see the problem; you see the possibilities. And because we all share that love of rhythm, and we've developed that both together collectively and externally with other people, it's a language that we all kind of speak. And of course, some stuff's still challenging, and especially when you first get hold of it or whatever. But it's something that when you all are pretty strong on, you can collectively create a lot of stuff together. And as I sort of mentioned before, if you've got very specific rhythms, then it creates like forced interaction. And one of the first things you often want to do is to be able to play across the bar line and actually toy with these rhythms. And so all kinds of interesting things can happen in a 3 or 4 piece group when you're all locked into the same rhythmic form and you're able to interact and maintain the form, but maybe play some other rhythms and interact together and then come back to the form. It creates this great tension and release and like this sort of symmetry and asymmetry where you can start to, maybe as the listener, you might start to hear a pulse become the new tempo when it's not, and then suddenly it kind of locks back in or whatever. So there's a lot of fun and games to be had with this kind of stuff, and there's a lot of spontaneous sort of creation that can happen, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need to be at the top of your game to do this, and you know, you've got many fans in the UK. Steve White being, you know, a household name who really, I think, did he call you a polyrhythmic monster in the
Yeah, he's a
nicest
very
possible sense?
he's a very nice man, Steve. And I have to say, I'm really grateful. He's done a lot of
He really
very kind
champions.
things for me.
Yeah, he champions you, doesn't he? And I totally. I mean, it's so exciting. Even the solo stuff you do, it's so creative. I mean, I'm looking at the drums behind you, and you've got some lovely crotales behind you there as well. I noticed. Do you use those much? Are they a big part of your?
Yeah, they're part of a sort of new exploration with so as I'm sure you're probably aware that the trio I play with, we've had this sort of ongoing collaboration with Evelyn Glennie for about 3 years or something now. And just before lockdown, we had sort of like a run of shows in Europe, and that was the first time that I'd started to play these live. So I think being around a tuned percussionist of Evelyn's caliber had quite a big effect on me and wanting to explore that more. And again, it all comes back to what I was saying about being influenced by the people you're working with, actually. Loads of things that I've gone into rabbit holes about are things that I've initially heard about or been introduced to by people that I play with, or people I know who are also musicians. You know, it's like that kind of social element of sharing ideas and saying, have you listened to this? Do you know what's going on here? Oh, wow, I'd never thought about that, or whatever. So,
Amazing.
So yeah, basically, I became interested in the crotales because I've for the last few years, I've been trying to do stuff with rhythmic counterpoint on the drum kit to maybe try and think about the drums more as a harmonic rhythmic instrument, which is to say more than one rhythm happening at the same time. I think maybe at the moment, linear stuff is extremely popular, and I love that too. But I'm very interested in the possibilities of the drum kit being performed more like an organ or a piano or something, when you've got these possibilities to layer things. And an extension of that is I'm now interested in having a sort of hybrid setup where you're maybe playing some melody whilst also playing some rhythm at points and things like that. So the crotales was an easy way to start to experiment with it, and there's a couple of compositions in the repertoire which use the crotales now. So the first time I played them was in Lithuania in February this year. That was like my tuned debut, as it were.
But I noticed you've got a xylophone. I think it's not marimba, it's a xylophone behind you, isn't it? So
Yeah.
you obviously learnt to read melody as well as rhythm, I guess, in uni. Do you play piano as well, or?
Very badly. It's something that I'm trying to explore a bit more at the moment, actually. I think it's very important to have, to try and develop a good ear for pitch, and I'm just very interested in that stuff at the moment, as well as a bunch of other stuff. So it might amount to nothing. I don't ever want to commit so much to one thing that I don't see the sparkles in the corner of my eye that sometimes lead to amazing things. But at the same time, for the last few years, I have tried to be quite focused about what I do. And I think it's been very beneficial for a multitude of reasons, actually. But with the pitch stuff, I think I have this slight ambition of trying to explore the drum kit in this more kind of harmonic sense, and see what's possible, and start to think about, when playing behind a soloist, maybe comping with dyads or something whilst also interacting with the rhythm, and maybe when soloing, sometimes playing rhythmically and sometimes playing melodically, but not melodically in terms of thinking about the shape on the kit, but actually thinking about playing within the tonal centers of the harmony, and yeah, it might amount to nothing.
You're into some heavy stuff there, Rich, I have to say. Oh, wow.
But for me, I think that comes back to the artist thing there. I don't take myself too seriously, but I try and take what I do quite seriously. And I'm sort of, there's a few things that have happened in the last few years that have made me aware that the sort of preciousness of every day of your life. And I think I want to make the most of my time behind the drums and try and do things which I think are meaningful and I'm interested in, and which I think maybe make a tiny, or try to make a tiny contribution to the art form of music, which I'm a massive, basically just a big fan of.
Totally. Well, you mentioned Evelyn before, and obviously an incredible percussionist. How did the collaboration come about with the trio and Evelyn? How did that come about? That must have been incredible when it happened.
Yeah, so it started off as just we wondered if she'd be interested in playing on a few tracks on our debut album. And we were thinking about basically when we were doing the album, we wanted to have a couple of guests, and we were thinking about what instruments and what musicians would work quite well. And we had two guests. One was the saxophonist Steve Lemon, who we're all a big fan of his work and his playing. And we thought that his language would work very well in the music we make. And we thought of Evelyn too, and we thought one of the reasons was that the possibilities of vibes and marimba and all the other instruments she can play as well. Like there's this huge palette of colors and textures that she could bring to the music. So
she's a genius, isn't she? She really is.
She's unbelievable. She's such an amazing musician, such an amazing person, and I'm really, really grateful for everything that we get to do together and all the kind of the learning that I get.
You can see she totally gets what the three of you are about as well. Obviously, she was there at the RNCM on that day, and it was breathtaking. It really was, and it seems a great vibe on stage between the four of you as well.
Yeah, it's great. That musical relationship has really developed over the last couple of years, and therefore, that's been great because we've been playing a lot together, and the music's benefited from that too. So basically, after she played on the album, we were having a cup of tea after recording. She said, it'd be really interesting to play this live. And so kind of from there, we started doing concerts with her and without her in trio and quartet format. And that still sort of continues to this day, which is great. And a lot of music's been written and a lot of language has been developed between us since then too. But yeah, it's a real privilege for me to get to play with her. We've got a little drum duet that we do every night, and that's really fun. It's also quite distracting because one of the many things she's brilliant at is interpretation and playing every phrase with so much expression and emotion, which is something I've tried to learn a lot from. But often when we're playing stuff, I'll hear the way she plays something and I'm like, God, just didn't play that as well as she did I?
Every day's a school day, as they say.
Yeah, 100%.
It's true, isn't it? But it's such an exciting thing to see as well. It's a visual thing as well, isn't it? Especially the setup with, well, your stage set is incredible when Evelyn's there as well, isn't it? It gets a bit nuts.
Yeah, sometimes when we send the advance out to promoters and things, we always say we need in at midday for 7:30 doors or whatever, and they always say well people don't normally need this much time. I'm like, well, we need to get in and assemble marimba, vibraphone, 2 timpani, 2 drum kits, Steinway Model D, guitar amp, bass guitar amp. We need to get speakers and things installed if it's a classical venue, and lighting, and so actually 7 hours isn't that much time. We've done it in some pretty short amounts of time. I think the record was we did a concert at St. Petersburg Philharmonia this year.
Yes.
And the orchestra was rehearsing before us, so we didn't have much time, and we had this room which was quite far away where we were able to set everything up and a bunch of people to help with the gear, but it was the most stressful setup ever. We had a couple of tech malfunctions as well, and they had to hold the doors, and everything just started working by the skin of its teeth, just as we were starting to think it wasn't going to happen.
Oh, I can imagine.
This was the sort of penultimate night of the tour, and was probably the biggest concert of the tour. And yeah, I just remember finishing that gig, and the relief, the adrenaline dump, and the exhaustion just kind of hit me all at once, because we'd driven that day from Tallinn in Estonia to St. Petersburg, and through the Russian border, and it was a long, early start, long drive, and we set up and we played this show, and then it was such a.
I mean, I've gigged in Russia. It's a big old country, isn't it? It's huge.
It's massive, and the border was insane. It was, yeah. I think it was the first time I've ever had a gun pulled on me.
So it's the last. But, you know, people, non-drummers, non-percussionists don't realize how vital it is to have that setup time, even for the placement of mallets and sticks, because you need things in a certain place, don't you? If you're, you know, you're moving, you're not stood behind one thing, are you? Well, with the kit, it's slightly different, I appreciate. But even then, things need to be, with the kind of playing you're doing, things have got to be just so, haven't they? It's that simple.
Yeah, it's definitely most challenging for Evelyn and Rich, the pianist, as well. So if we're traveling internationally, then she has to use different instruments every night, and the scale for marimba and xylophone is not standard on different brands and different models. So if you can imagine, like, sat down to play a piece that, you know, is very tech heavy, under a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of composed notes, and you're having to look somewhere else, and maybe you're playing the piano, and then suddenly someone makes the keys twice as big, and you've got to adjust to that. Like, you need time to play on that instrument and get used to it and start to visualize it when you're reading. And how people do that, like how everyone does that and performs so well on these different instruments, which are different heights, different widths of bar every night, is beyond me. And it's kind of slightly similar with pianos, with Rich, where, you know, you don't know how heavy the action is going to be, or you can have all kinds of problems. Whereas, like, myself and Ant are a little bit luckier generally. I get what I ask for drum kit wise, and I normally take, like, my cymbals and my crotales, and sometimes some pedals with me, depending. Normally take like 2 bags with stuff.
It's pretty familiar, your setup to you then, isn't it? You know, you're not taking any great chances. Drums tend to be drums, don't they? Really?
Yeah, I always sit on the fence on this thing, because I think on the one hand, it's really nice, particularly with this music when a lot of it's composed. It's really nice to not have to think about stuff, and for everyone to kind of be what's familiar to you. But I also really believe in that Art Blakey quote, which is like, you play the drums, they don't play you. And so I think that you know, one should be able to get a good sound out of any sort of functioning instrument, and particularly if you're not having to think quite so much about heavily composed stuff, you should be able to respond to what's available to you, even if you don't have a bass drum, or even if you don't have a hi-hat, and make music with it. And so I think that it's good to be challenged, and I think it's good to always, like, be aware that these and these have way more of an effect than what's in front of you on how good you're going to sound.
I like that. Yes, definitely. That's a good sentiment, that. So, excuse me. So since lockdown, Rich, you've been pretty busy, haven't you? I've seen some of the collaboration stuff you've done. The most recent one, I think, was it? Oh gosh, it was only this week that came out, I think. Did you?
Yeah, with BC Mangineth, yeah.
That's just incredible. Would you do me a favor? Would you talk me through how you build something up like that? Is it done to click? Is it done because it's so tight? I've watched it about 20 times and gone, nah, don't know.
So that one, Mangineth had already composed that as a standalone conical piece. And so for that one, I'm really into South Indian rhythm, and I find it, you know, fascinating. It's such a deep and amazing art form, the Carnatic music. So I have this project which I call Drum Interpretations, which is where I take different bits of music and that are not composed for or on the drum kit and work out how to play them on the drums. And it's kind of, it comes back to that artist thing a little bit, which is like something that I'm very interested in. And it also just comes down to like feeding my own curiosity about the possibilities for me of playing different types of music on the drum kit. So the first piece was a ligety harpsichord piece, and I was trying to think about trying to play the drum kit like a piano, so the feet playing the left hand part and the hands playing the right hand part. And then the second piece was a beatbox piece, Tigran Hamasia, and I was trying to think about thinking like a beatboxer and that sort of more kind of like broken beat style, single voicing, smaller drum kit, and trying to reverse engineer that. The third one was the Steve Reich piece, where I was trying to think about rhythmic counterpoint. The fourth one was Buddy Rich's Bus Rant, and I was thinking about interpreting speech, both the rhythm and the pitch. And then this latest one is Manjinev's conical composition. So just to go back a tiny bit, the main thing for all of these is that each one's a sort of individual exploration for me into the drum kit, into creativity, and just trying to make something that if I wasn't involved with it, I would enjoy watching. So I think a little bit about how the video looks and get some people to help me with that.
They're all pretty unrelated, aren't they, musically? You know.
Yes, and I'm really trying to see like what roles I can make the drum kit fulfill, and therefore then try and take some of that into my playing outside of it, you know. So with the conical one, because I'm so interested in conical, I wanted to start transcribing some pieces and then trying to play them on the drum kit, and then maybe try and think about some conical phrases and improvise in that way. So one of the amazing things about Indian rhythm is that you tend to learn a phrase in all subdivisions and sort of all places in the bar line, and that's an approach which I've kind of taken for quite a long time anyway with the music that I play, because it's required, and I'm very interested in that and the possibilities it brings. So it seems like tailor-made to learn from this 5,000-year-old tradition of rhythm, which is so deep. And so anyway, I've gone off on a massive tangent, but to get back to how I went about doing it, when I heard this piece by Manjineth, I thought, I've got to learn it, and I've got to learn from it, because there's so much information I want to learn about. So the form of the piece is called conical in 75/16, but in actuality, it's a form which goes 5/2, 5/4, 5/8, 5/16, and then repeats. So it's like a sort of collapsing 5, where it feels like the tempo is doubling each time. So again, that form creates amazing forced interaction and amazing tension and release, or like dissonance and resolution when you start to put phrases across it, and it hits this 5/16 phrase, which means that if you're playing like a 4-note phrase, it starts to sound like it's starting a beat earlier when you come back around or whatever. So I found the form pretty easy to follow, because I'm used to playing forms which change a lot, and it's quite a short form. Some of the trio forms maybe don't repeat for like, you know, like 60 bars, and every one is a different bar. So even if the time signature is the same, the groupings are in a different order, and all that stuff is stuff you can learn just by, you know, doing it. I think a lot of people often ask me about memorizing stuff, and I say, like, just start by memorizing a bar a day and you'd be amazed what you can do. So I memorize all the drum interpretations because I want them to be coming from here out. I don't want to be reading them, because I want to actually have that information inside me to be able to use elsewhere. I don't want to just be able to recite it, as it were.
Totally understand that, yes.
So I transcribed it, and then it didn't take too long to transcribe the conical phrasings, and then I didn't do anything with it for a while because I wanted it to be the 5th one I released. And then when lockdown happened, I was like, okay, it's time for number 5, and I've got a bit of time. So I dug it out and just started to think about how to play those phrases on the drum kit. So I'd experiment with different setups and different approaches. So there's one common set of syllables which is used as like ta, di, gi, na, tom, 5 notes. So I started thinking about, well, how can I make those 5 sounds on the drum kit, and would mess around with things. And from there would start to sort of compose and interpret the piece by just looking at it in phrases and thinking, how do I play that phrase? And, you know, maybe if a similar phrase comes back up after a few times round, you've now got a bit of a modus operandi. You've got an MO of how you might interpret that, and just being creative with it. Like, where do you start with anything? You start by trying, and then you reflect on it, and then you make changes, and then you implement those changes, and then you cycle around it. Like, and that applies in a broader sense for everything in life, and that applies in small senses, like trying to play any kind of groove or pattern on the drum kit. You play it, you listen to it, and then you think, what could I do better? So I just go through it bit by bit, learn it, memorize it, record it, listen to it, see if I like it, see what I need changed, and then go through it. And in terms of getting it tight, I would, if I record it, I'd listen back and I'd see like, oh, maybe I feel that I'm behind that phrase a bit, or I feel there's a bit of forward momentum in that phrase, so I need to follow it. And then I would just, you know, practice making sure that that was together, if you will.
Because it's hard to describe how tight that is. If you haven't seen it, it's up on your Facebook page, isn't it, Rich? Your Rich Kass. Is it Rich Kass Drummer?
Rich Kass Drums, yeah, that's the one.
Rich Kass Drums. Just check it out, because you'll be totally blown away. I must have watched it 20 times now. And the Steve Reich one, is it the clapping
music? Yeah.
Oh, another just magical piece of music. Amazing. So do check them out, because I think you'll be very, very impressed. But I'm totally blown away with it, Rich. It's just incredible. It really is. It's so different to everything else that's going on at the moment. You know, there's lots of drum videos and lots of people posting things, but that is breathtaking, I think is the word for that one. So superb.
Oh, thanks very much.
Go on, sorry. Carry on.
Just with the tightness and things, I think sometimes people put too much pressure on themselves in terms of having to have something done by a certain time or whatever. Like, people often ask me how long it takes to do something. And again, it probably comes back to what I was saying about I'm not very aware of time. Like, I'm not really interested in how long it takes me to do it versus somebody else. I'm interested in the results.
Yeah.
So, and if you can think that way, then you will get the results. Because often in the previous times when I'd think more about, I've got to have this together for 2 weeks' time, I would try and take shortcuts, or I'd say that's good enough. And actually, that doesn't help. It makes it worse sometimes. And what you're better off doing is saying, well, it's not there yet. And to be honest, I'm going to be learning for the rest of my life. Some things I think I've got to a decent standard now, and some people who I admire have got time for it. And that gives me confidence to keep doing it. Absolutely. But it's all about just, you know, repeating the process and getting closer to the object, which is always getting further away.
Oh, well, honestly, I keep going on about it, but the result is absolutely stunning. And as you say, taking your time, the thing is, once you're committed to tape, it's there forever, isn't it? And once you've released it, so you want it as right as it's ever going to be. And it is. It's just...
Yeah, all the guys who I've had guys and girls who have had lessons off, who I really admire, they have always had amazing attention to detail and sound and what they're shooting for. And so that's something I've learned to try and aspire to, is to not be quite so complacent, not to like beat myself up, but to be aware that stuff could always be improved, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's superb. Well, look, we're coming towards the end of the interview. But before we do, you've got into fashion design lately. I've got to mention it. Where did this come from?
Well, I like making stuff. That's the main thing. So with drum interpretations, I do them because I like making them. I like making the video.
Yeah, of
I
course.
like thinking about the music. I like making stuff out of wood, like this rack behind me, and you
Okay.
can't see above me. There's a mezzanine floor above me, and I just that's my thing. I think is
Yeah.
physically putting things together is something I get a kick out of. So anyway, I've had loads of ideas for t-shirt designs for a while. With lockdown, obviously, there's a lot less happening. So I was like, I'm just gonna dip my toe in the water and design a few t-shirts and see if anyone's interested. Might sport one in my latest video to get a bit of free advertising, and actually they've been quite popular, which is cool.
Well, the one you're wearing, which I've just bought as well, not that very one. That is genius. I have to say that is really really clever. That
I've
really.
got a few others in the pipeline actually, but I don't want to say too much about them just yet because they might be a while in coming out. But yeah, it's fun. It's just fun being creative, and I've got a pal who's a brilliant graphic designer. So if I say like, "Oh, I'm thinking about this," he'll be like, "Okay, yeah, I can draw that," or what about this for an idea? I'll give him something so abstract that you wouldn't have a clue what to think, and he'll put something together. So I'm quite lucky to have some talented pals as well.
Well, you've shifted a lot already. They've only been like released. Is it a week or something? And you're doing great guns with them.
Yeah, it's been great. I just put them up on the website, on my website today, so that eventually I don't have to sort of keep track of them, but the orders just come in and
Yeah.
the shipping label gets printed. I can turf them out. But I just put a post on my personal page to see if anyone wanted them, and yeah, I was quite surprised. It was very kind. A lot of people being very very generous.
Just, do you want to say your website, Rich? And I'll put it on at the end of the interview anyway, so people can see it. So if they want a T-shirt, where do they go?
Just go to richkass.com. That's Cass with a K. And if you want to go straight to the t-shirts, then richkass.com/store. And
You can be cool like Rich and me, of course. I'll be wearing one very soon. So look, Rich, thanks for doing this. An absolutely incredible hour. I've learned a whole lot of stuff, and I'm sure everybody else will enjoy it equally. So I appreciate you giving your time up. And let's hope we get gigging again soon, and you can be out doing what you do well.
thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Matty. I really appreciate it. It's really kind of you.
Total pleasure. So thanks once again, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much. Cheers, Rich. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye bye. Bye bye.